The mist clung to the headstones like ghostly fingers, reluctant to release their grip even as morning light struggled through the ancient oaks. For 30 years, Martin had tended these grounds, his shovel the only constant companion in a world of grief and whispered goodbyes. He noticed them separately at first, two men visiting grave 237, always on different days, each leaving identical white roses. Their resemblance was uncanny, yet they never acknowledged each other's existence. Today, Martin spotted them approaching from opposite paths, unaware of their impending collision. Don't forget to subscribe to hear what happens when these strangers finally meet at the mysterious grave 237. Martin hunched his weathered frame over the shovel, digging methodically as he had done for 3 decades. The cemetery was more home to him than the small cottage at the edge of town where he returned each night to empty rooms and fading photographs. His calloused hands bore the history of countless graves, final resting places for strangers and, occasionally, people he had known in the small community of Oakridge. The job of gravedigger had fallen to him after his wife Sarah's death. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd spend his days creating spaces for the dead after failing to save the one person who mattered most. Sarah had succumbed to cancer while Martin watched helplessly, his construction worker's strength useless against an enemy he couldn't see or fight. All he wanted now was the quiet dignity of doing his job well, honoring the dead with perfectly rectangular graves and meticulously maintained grounds. The cemetery board appreciated his dedication, though they rarely said so directly. The townspeople nodded respectfully when they saw him, but kept their distance, as if death might be contagious through his touch. Sheriff Blackwood was different. He made his disdain obvious, especially after Martin began noting the strange pattern of the 2 visitors to grave 237. Keeping tabs on mourners now, are we? Blackwood had sneered last week when Martin mentioned his observations at the town council meeting. Perhaps if you spent more time fixing that eyesore of a maintenance shed instead of spying on grieving families, this cemetery might look less like a forgotten wasteland. The room had fallen silent. Martin felt the heat rise in his face as council members averted their eyes. He'd only wanted to mention the peculiarity. Something wasn't right about those 2 men and their identical roses. "I'm just doing my job," Martin had mumbled. "Your job is digging holes and filling them, not playing detective," Blackwood replied, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Some of us have real responsibilities in this town." Martin had slunk away, humiliated. But the sheriff's dismissal only strengthened his resolve to understand what connected these 2 strangers, and why Blackwood seemed so determined to discourage his curiosity about grave 237. The first confrontation happened on a Tuesday morning, when Sheriff Blackwood's patrol car rolled to a stop on the gravel path near where Martin was trimming around headstones. The sheriff didn't bother getting out, just rolled down his window and beckoned Martin over with a lazy flick of his fingers. "Got a complaint about you," Blackwood said, sunglasses hiding his eyes but not the smirk playing at his lips. "Mrs. Henderson says you were hovering around her husband's funeral yesterday, staring at the mourners. Says it made everyone uncomfortable." Martin's throat tightened. "I was just maintaining respectful distance until—" "Save it," Blackwood cut him off. "These people pay good money to bury their loved ones here. They don't need some creepy old man watching them cry." He leaned forward. "Stay out of sight when families are present. Understand? Or the council might reconsider your position here." As the patrol car pulled away, Martin noticed several visitors watching from a distance, whispering behind cupped hands. The shame burned deeper than the summer sun on his neck. 3 days later, Martin was eating lunch on a bench near the eastern fence when he spotted one of the mysterious men approaching grave 237. He was tall, mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and an expensive suit. Martin casually moved closer, pretending to inspect a nearby angel statue. "Excuse me," the man called out, his voice sharp with authority. "Is there something you need?" Before Martin could respond, Sheriff Blackwood appeared as if from nowhere, striding across the lawn. "Is this man bothering you, Mr. Reynolds?" Blackwood asked, hand resting on his holster. "He seems to be watching me," Reynolds replied. Blackwood turned to Martin, ice cold. "This is the second complaint this week. First Mrs. Henderson, now Mr. Reynolds here. I was just nothing," Blackwood snapped, loud enough for other visitors to turn and stare. "Mr. Reynolds is on the town council finance committee. Show some respect." "It's fine," Reynolds said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Just keep your staff at a distance, Sheriff." Martin stood frozen as both men walked away, feeling dozens of eyes on him. The whispers would spread through town by nightfall. The final humiliation came during the annual cemetery memorial service. The mayor, council members, and most of Oakridge's prominent citizens gathered for the ceremony honoring the town's founders. Martin had spent days preparing the grounds, making everything perfect. As the ceremony concluded, Mayor Wilson was thanking various community members when Sheriff Blackwood whispered something in his ear. The mayor's expression shifted. "And while we appreciate the maintenance work done here," the mayor said, his tone noticeably cooler, "I must remind everyone that this is a place of respect. There have been concerning reports about inappropriate monitoring of grieving families." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Martin felt the blood drain from his face as people turned to stare. Therefore, the mayor continued, "We'll be installing security cameras throughout the cemetery and reviewing our staffing arrangements." Martin stood at the back, mortification washing over him as Blackwood smirked triumphantly. Several council members avoided eye contact entirely. That evening, after everyone had gone, Martin retreated to the small office in the maintenance building. He unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a worn leather journal. Inside were meticulous notes spanning decades, names, dates, unusual occurrences, and detailed maps of every section of the cemetery. Behind this journal was another, filled with newspaper clippings about unsolved disappearances in Oakridge dating back 40 years. Martin had been the assistant coroner before becoming the gravedigger, with training in forensic observation that nobody in town remembered or acknowledged. He carefully added notes about today's confrontation, then turned to the page marked Grave 237, where he documented every visit by both men for the past 3 years, including photographs taken with a small camera hidden in his work vest. From the shadows of a black sedan parked beyond the cemetery gates, Congresswoman Eleanor Vance observed the confrontation through tinted windows. She tapped her diamond ring against the glass and whispered to her driver, "Tell our friend at the FBI it's time." The gravedigger knows too much. Martin knew he couldn't continue this passive observation any longer. With the town turning against him and security cameras soon to be installed, his window of opportunity was closing fast. 20 years of patient documentation had led to this moment. It was time to use the skills he'd buried along with his former identity. Before becoming Oakridge Cemetery's caretaker, Dr. Martin Reeves had been a forensic pathologist with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. His specialty, identifying patterns in seemingly unrelated deaths. A case gone wrong, one that powerful people wanted buried, had forced him into this quiet exile. But he'd never stopped watching, waiting, and documenting. The next morning, Martin arrived at the cemetery before dawn. He retrieved a small metal case from beneath a loose floorboard in the maintenance shed. Inside lay credentials and equipment from his previous life, preserved like artifacts from another time. He selected several items, a high-resolution camera with night vision capabilities, a digital voice recorder, and a small GPS tracker. He worked methodically at Grave 237, carefully placing the miniature camera within the arrangement of artificial flowers that adorned the headstone. The angle provided a perfect view of anyone standing before the grave. Next, he installed the voice recorder, disguised as a decorative stone. Finally, he scattered a fine powder around the perimeter of the plot, a special compound that would capture shoe impressions far better than the soft cemetery soil. By mid-morning, Martin had resumed his regular duties, keeping one eye on Sheriff Blackwood's patrol car as it made increasingly frequent passes by the cemetery gates. Around noon, the sheriff finally entered, walking with exaggerated authority toward Martin. "I've got the security company coming tomorrow," Blackwood announced, thumbs hooked in his belt loops. "Mayor wants a full system, cameras, motion sensors, the works." Martin nodded meekly. "Whatever the town needs, Sheriff. And I'll be reviewing the footage personally," Blackwood added with a smirk. "No more of your observations." "Just doing my job," Martin replied, eyes downcast. "Your job is digging holes and keeping your mouth shut." Blackwood stepped closer, not asking questions about who visits which graves. Martin noticed something he hadn't before, a slight tremor in Blackwood's right hand, the same nervous tick he'd observed in Reynolds during their confrontations. "Interesting. I understand completely," Martin said. After Blackwood left, Martin returned to his small apartment above the maintenance building. He activated his laptop, a powerful machine that seemed out of place among his modest possessions, and connected to the devices he planted. Now he would wait. He didn't have to wait long. Just after dusk, the camera captured Reynolds approaching Grave 237. The man looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. He placed a small envelope beneath one of the stone arrangements, whispered something inaudible, then quickly departed. 3 hours later, the second visitor arrived, a man Martin had documented dozens of times but whose identity remained unknown. Unlike Reynolds, this visitor moved with confidence, retrieving the envelope without hesitation. The camera captured a clear image of his face as he examined the contents. Martin froze the frame and enhanced the image. He ran it through a facial recognition program he shouldn't still have access to. But old passwords sometimes remained active when bureaucracies forgot about their exiled agents. The match came back within minutes. Victor Crane, former Special Operations, now working as a private security consultant for several congressional committees, including the one Reynolds served as a local liaison for. Martin dug deeper, cross-referencing dates from his journal with public records. A pattern emerged. Every exchange at the grave preceded a major government contract award or zoning change that benefited Reynolds' private development company. The most recent visits aligned perfectly with a controversial federal land sale that had transferred protected forest to private developers at a fraction of its value. By morning, Martin had compiled a comprehensive file documenting years of corruption. Reynolds was clearly using his position on the town council and his connections to the congressional committee to sell influence, with Crane serving as the middleman to higher powers. But Martin needed more, something that would directly implicate Blackwood, who clearly provided protection for the operation. The sheriff's involvement explained why previous complaints about the land deals had mysteriously disappeared from county records. Martin decided to force their hand. He placed an anonymous call to Reynolds using a voice modulator. The usual arrangement at 237 has been compromised, he said simply. Meet at the old mausoleum instead. Midnight. That evening, Martin positioned himself in the shadows of the Victorian-era mausoleum, camera ready. At precisely midnight, Reynolds arrived, pacing nervously. 15 minutes later, Sheriff Blackwood appeared instead of Crane. "Where's the package?" Blackwood demanded. "I don't have it," Reynolds replied. "I got a call saying things were compromised." "What call?" "From who?" Blackwood's hand moved to his weapon. "I don't know." "Same voice as always." "I thought it was your people changing the location." "My people?" "I'm just the insurance policy, Reynolds. This is your operation." Martin captured every word, every gesture. The two men argued, unaware they were providing exactly the evidence needed to connect them both to the corruption scheme. "Congresswoman Vance won't be happy," Blackwood finally said. "That land deal is worth millions to her campaign donors. Tell her to calm down. We'll make the exchange tomorrow, same place." Whoever called was probably just testing us. As they departed, Martin remained hidden, processing what he'd learned. Congresswoman Eleanor Vance, the third piece of the puzzle. Her involvement explained the federal angle, how local corruption connected to Washington power brokers. The next morning, Martin prepared to make his move. He compiled all his evidence onto an encrypted drive and wrote a detailed summary of the corruption network. He made 3 copies, one for the state attorney general, one for a journalist he trusted from his FBI days, and one to be hidden in case anything happened to him. As he walked toward his truck, a black sedan pulled alongside him. The window lowered, revealing a face he hadn't seen in 15 years. "Hello, Martin," said Assistant Director Thomas Hargrove of the FBI. Or should I say, Dr. Reeves? Martin tensed, ready to run. "Relax," Hargrove said. "I'm not here to expose you." "Quite the opposite. How did you find me? We never lost you. Some of us thought you might be useful someday, exactly where you are." Hargrove handed him a small device. "This will bypass any surveillance system Blackwood installs. It also contains updated credentials for our databases. Your old ones triggered an alert when you used them yesterday." Martin took the device cautiously. "Why help me now? Let's just say Congresswoman Vance has enemies in high places too. People who've been waiting for someone to build a case against her network." Hargrove's expression hardened. "But be careful. What you've uncovered goes beyond a small-town sheriff and corrupt councilman. These people disappear problems." "I know the risks," Martin replied. "Good. There's a secure server address on that device. Upload everything you have, then proceed however you see fit locally. We'll handle the federal angles quietly." Hargrove paused. "And Martin, some of us always believed you were right about the Westlake case. This might be your way back if you want it." As the sedan pulled away, Martin felt a strange mixture of vindication and dread. His past and present were colliding, but at least now he wasn't fighting alone. He returned to his office and began uploading his evidence, preparing for the confrontation that would either restore his name or bury him permanently alongside the secrets of Oakridge Cemetery. What do you think will happen next in Martin's dangerous game of cat and mouse? Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. I'd love to know which part of the world this story has reached. The upload froze midway. Martin's screen flashed with an intrusion alert. Someone was tracking his connection. Simultaneously, his phone buzzed with a text. Westlake evidence wasn't destroyed. They know you survived. Run. The message came from a number he hadn't seen in 15 years. Martin's heart pounded as he stared at the text message. 15 years of careful anonymity shattered in an instant. He yanked the drive from his computer and grabbed his go bag from beneath the floorboard, a habit from his FBI days he'd never abandoned. Inside were cash, burner phone, and a 9mm Glock he hoped he wouldn't need. The cemetery grounds were eerily quiet as he slipped out the back door of his cottage. He scanned the perimeter, noting a black SUV parked just beyond the main gate. Not Hargrove's sedan. Someone else was watching. His phone buzzed again. Same number, Blackwood meeting vance at the old Oakridge chapel. 1 hour. Evidence in the crypt below. The abandoned chapel stood at the cemetery's far edge, a Gothic relic closed decades ago when a new memorial center was built. Martin had avoided it during his tenure, finding its crumbling facade unsettling. Now it seemed fitting that this would be where everything converged. He needed allies. Martin dialed the journalist he'd prepared evidence for, Rebecca Chin, an investigative reporter who'd once helped expose corruption in the Bureau. It's happening now, he said when she answered. Oakridge Chapel, 1 hour. Bring whatever recording equipment you have. Martin, is that really? No time. I'll explain everything, but this is the story you've been waiting for. Congresswoman Vance, Sheriff Blackwood, and the Westlake case. It's all connected. After a pause, she said, I'm 40 minutes out. Don't do anything stupid before I get there. His next call was to Hargrove, but it went straight to voicemail. Martin left a terse message with a location and time, then considered his options. Going it alone would be suicide, but waiting might mean losing his only chance to obtain the Westlake evidence, proof that he'd been right all along, that he'd been framed. The chapel loomed before him 20 minutes later, its stone facade partially obscured by overgrown ivy. Martin circled the building, noting a delivery van parked behind it and light flickering through the stained glass windows. They were already inside. He found a side entrance, its ancient lock easily picked with tools from his bag. The door opened to a narrow stairwell leading down to the crypt. Voices echoed from below, Blackwood's distinctive drawl and a woman's sharp, authoritative tone he assumed belonged to Congresswoman Vance. I don't care what it takes, the woman was saying. Those files never see daylight. The Westlake operation was sanctioned at the highest levels. My contact says Reeves is alive, Blackwood responded. Living right under our noses as the damn Gravedigger. Impossible. I saw the DNA report myself. Well, someone's been digging into our business, and they know too much. The timing's not coincidental. Martin edged closer, staying in the shadows of the stairwell. The crypt was dimly lit by portable lamps, illuminating stone walls lined with ancient burial niches. In the center stood Blackwood, Councilman Winters, and a tall, elegant woman he recognized from news coverage as Eleanor Vance. A fourth figure remained partially hidden behind a stone column. The exchange happens now, Vance demanded. I've upheld my end. The land deal goes through next week, and your investors make millions. You give me the Westlake files, and this entire chapter closes permanently. Winters opened a briefcase, removing a hard drive and several folders. 15 years of insurance, gone just like that. I hope you appreciate what we've done for you, Congresswoman. What you've done is extortion, Vance snapped. If those files had ever leaked. But they didn't, the fourth figure said, stepping into the light. Martin froze. Assistant Director Hargrove. Because we've all been very careful. Martin's mind raced. Hargrove wasn't an ally, he was part of the conspiracy. The device he'd given Martin wasn't a help. It was to track him, to confirm his identity. A soft noise behind him made Martin turn. Rebecca Chin stood there, camera in hand, eyes wide with shock as she took in the scene below. She'd arrived earlier than expected and followed him in. Martin pressed a finger to his lips, then pointed to her camera. She nodded, already recording. The problem, Hargrove continued, is our Gravedigger. If it is Reeves, he knows enough to connect the dots. The Westlake case was messy, too many loose ends. Then we clean it up, Blackwood said. Permanently this time. Martin felt a cold resolve settle over him. This was the moment, his chance to expose them all and clear his name. But moving too soon would be fatal. He needed to get closer to capture irrefutable evidence of their conspiracy. He gestured for Rebecca to stay put and began descending the stairs, keeping to the shadows. The stone steps were slick with moisture, forcing him to move slowly, deliberately. Once we have confirmation on Reeves, Vance was saying, we'll need to accelerate the timeline on the land development. The cemetery will need to be relocated, all of it. The families won't like that, Winters objected. The families will accept generous compensation in a new memorial park, Vance replied coldly. What they won't know is that we're burying evidence along with relocating their loved ones. Martin reached the bottom of the stairs, positioning himself behind an ancient sarcophagus. From here, he could see all four conspirators clearly, and the table between them holding the Westlake files. His vindication was just feet away. Rebecca's camera light suddenly flashed as she adjusted settings, a momentary red glow in the darkness of the stairwell. Blackwood's head snapped up. We're not alone, he growled, drawing his service weapon. Martin had seconds to decide. He could retreat, preserving the recording they'd already captured but losing the Westlake evidence. Or he could confront them directly, risking everything for complete vindication. He chose the latter. Looking for me? Martin stepped into the light, hands raised. Or should I say, looking for Agent Martin Reeves? 4 pairs of eyes locked onto him, expressions ranging from shock to cold calculation. Well, Hargrove recovered first. The dead man returns. Not so dead, Martin replied. Just buried. Like the truth about Westlake, Blackwood aimed his weapon at Martin's chest. You should have stayed buried. Lower the gun, Sheriff, Martin said calmly. Unless you want to add my murder to the recording that's being live-streamed right now. It was a bluff. Rebecca wasn't live-streaming, but the uncertainty that flashed across their faces told Martin it had landed. Vance stepped forward, her political mask firmly in place. Agent Reeves, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We can discuss this reasonably. I'm done with reason, Martin replied, moving toward the table with the files. 15 years of my life are in those folders. I'm taking them, and you're all going to answer for what you've done. Hargrove's hand moved toward his jacket. I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Martin. The moment stretched taut as a wire. Martin stood at the precipice of either justice or destruction, the truth within reach, but death just as close. The tension in the crypt crystallized as Hargrove's hand emerged from his jacket, not with a weapon as Martin had feared, but with a small recording device. I've been documenting everything myself, Hargrove said, his voice unnervingly calm. Insurance, you might call it. Against my colleagues here. Blackwood's gun wavered. What the hell are you talking about? I suspected this day would come, Hargrove continued. I was never leaving Martin. Someone would eventually connect the dots. I've prepared accordingly. Vance stepped forward, her political smile cracking. Richard, whatever you think you're doing, what I should have done 15 years ago, Hargrove interrupted. The Westlake case wasn't just messy. It was unconscionable. Martin watched the alliance fracture before his eyes. The power dynamics shifted like tectonic plates beneath them. You were the architect of the cover-up, Martin said to Hargrove, disbelief coloring his words. And I've regretted it every day since, Hargrove replied. My ambition blinded me. I thought I could control the narrative, use it as leverage. But some sins weigh too heavily. Winters laughed bitterly. So the great Richard Hargrove found his conscience at last. How convenient. Put the gun down, Sheriff, Martin repeated to Blackwood, whose weapon now seemed to weigh heavily in his hand. A clatter on the stairs announced Rebecca's presence as she emerged, camera raised. Everything's recorded. It's backed up to secure cloud storage. You can't erase this. Blackwood's arrogance finally crumbled. His gun lowered slowly as the inevitability of exposure dawned on him. You don't understand what's at stake? Vance hissed, her political mask completely dissolved. The development project will bring millions to this dying town. We can't let ancient history derail progress. Ancient history? Martin stepped closer, righteous anger fueling his courage. You buried an innocent man's reputation to protect a murderer. You let a killer walk free because he had the right connections. That's not history, that's an ongoing crime. Hargrove placed his recording device on the table beside the Westlake files. "It's over, Elizabeth. The truth was always going to surface eventually. You self-righteous bastard," Vance spat. "You were happy enough to take the judgeship that came from your silence." "Yes," Hargrove admitted, shoulders sagging with the weight of his confession. "My guilt and my position are both mine to bear, but no longer in silence." The confrontation ended not with violence, but with resignation. Blackwood placed his weapon on the ground. Winters collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. Vance stood rigid, calculating even in defeat. Martin gathered the Westlake files, hands trembling slightly. "Justice will be imperfect," he said quietly. 15 years can't be returned to me. The Westlake family can't get back their loved one. But the truth matters, even late." As they emerged from the crypt into the cemetery's night air, blue lights flashed in the distance. Rebecca had indeed called for backup before following Martin down the stairs, a contingency he hadn't anticipated but now welcomed. "It won't be clean," Rebecca warned him. "Powerful people have powerful friends. They'll fight the charges, spin narratives, try to discredit you." Martin looked across the cemetery to where two graves, one marked with his own name, the other with Westlake's, stood as silent witnesses to years of deception. "Let them try," he said. "Some truths can't be buried forever." As dawn broke over the cemetery, Martin watched as Hargrove, Vance, Blackwood, and Winters were led away in separate vehicles. The justice he'd sought for 15 years had arrived, not in a blaze of vindication, but the quiet collapse of a conspiracy undone by its own weight. The Gravedigger had finally unearthed the most important truth of all, that no secret remains buried forever, and that even the most powerful must eventually face what they've done. The morning sun filtered through the blinds as Martin sipped his coffee, savoring the simple pleasure of a quiet breakfast in his own apartment. 3 months had passed since the arrests, and while the legal proceedings continued to unfold, his name had been officially cleared. The town of Oakridge was still reeling from the scandal, but for Martin, each day without looking over his shoulder felt like a gift. He found work at a local bookstore, appreciating the orderly simplicity of shelving novels and helping customers. The owner, an elderly woman named Doris, had hired him without hesitation after reading about his story in the papers. "This town owes you peace," she'd said simply. Rebecca called weekly, updating him on her investigative series that had garnered national attention. They'd meet occasionally for coffee, their shared experience creating a bond neither had expected. As Martin walked to work that morning, he nodded to neighbors who now greeted him with respect rather than suspicion. The weight of 15 years had lifted from his shoulders, allowing him to stand tall again. At the cemetery's edge, he paused briefly. He no longer visited daily, but something caught his eye, a woman placing flowers at Westlake's grave. She looked familiar, though Martin couldn't place her. When she turned, their eyes met briefly before she hurried away, dropping a small leather-bound journal beside the headstone. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed this story. Share your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think the mysterious woman might be?